I want to begin our conversation about community and why community with 3 stories of why community is important but also challenging. The first is a classical rabbinic parable where a man enters the afterlife and he sees a long table full of food, but he sees that everyone seated at that table has no elbows. Their arms are straight, they cannot bend them. And so it is a table full of delicious food and drink, but they are unable to help themselves. And he asks his guide through this journey, am I in Gehenna? Am I in the afterworld of punishment, described even in Jewish sources, not only in Christian literature? And the guide says, no, watch what happens. And when the meal begins, it turns out that people across the table from each other use their utensils to feed each other. And that is how they manage to enjoy this beautiful repast. It is, in fact, the opposite of Gehenna. It is Gan Eden, it is paradise, but it is only made so by people cooperating with each other. The second story, a man is lost on a desert island. Or let's be gender equal. A woman is lost on a desert island. And after a year, she's rescued. When the rescuers find her, they see she has built 2 buildings, and both have Jewish stars on them. And they say to her, what are these 2 buildings, and why are there Jewish stars on them? She says, well, this first building is my synagogue, and the second one is the synagogue I would never set foot in. And you think, why bother with the energy to build the second one? But in some ways, the first one doesn't mean anything unless you have the second one to say, I'm not that. And then I'll share with you a short video that represents the third example.
Once I was in San Francisco, walking along the Golden Gate Bridge, and I saw this guy on the bridge about to jump. I said, come on. You're not the only person in this world saddled with a few problems. Besides, you're forgetting about God. He said, how do you know there's a God? I said, of course there's a God. Do you think billions of years ago, a bunch of molecules floating around at random without rhyme or reason could someday have had the sense of humor to make you look like that? He said, I used to believe in God. I said, that's good. Were you a Christian or a Jew? He said, a Christian. I said, me too. Protestant or Catholic? He said, Protestant. I said, me too. What franchise? He says, Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Baptist or Southern Baptist? He says, Northern Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist or Northern Liberal Baptist? He says, Northern Conservative Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist or Northern Conservative Reform Baptist? He says, Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist, Great Lakes region, or Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist, Eastern region? He says, Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist, Great Lakes region. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist, Great Lakes region, Council of 1879, or Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist, Great Lakes region, Council of 1912. He says, Northern Conservative Fundamentalist Baptist, Great Lakes region, Council of 1912. I said, die, heretic! And I pushed him over.
You see, sometimes the problem is not just who's in, but who's out. And it can be easier to define yourselves positively, but notice also how sometimes that definition gets into the splitting hairs and splitting hairs. I mean, all those different subsets of the franchises he described it, and yet even so, the smallest of differences of which council one followed was enough to cause the end of the story. Well, we define ourselves at Kol Hadash as a humanistic Jewish congregation. So what do we mean by all of those terms? For us, humanism means our positive focus. We focus on what we can do and what we can know to make the world a better place. Too often, religions tell people what they cannot do, telling them to look for help from somewhere else or from something else out there. At Kol Hadash, we emphasize what we know and what we can still learn about the world and about ourselves. And we see all that human power has already done and can still do to lengthen life, to relieve suffering, to improve the world. Most importantly, we also embrace the responsibility that comes with that knowledge and power. If we are all there is that is consciously acting in the world, then we can manage life's journey together without a supernatural safety net. And if bad things do happen, and we certainly have seen our share of bad things in the last 12 months, we don't have to add guilt to our suffering and assume it was our fault and the cosmos is punishing us. We focus on the practical. How did it happen? What can we do now to deal with it? And how can we avoid it in the future? Using human knowledge and human power. Secondly, Jewish. Well, for us, being Jewish, connecting to Judaism, Judaism is our culture. We are part of the Jewish family by birth or by marriage or by joining this Jewish tradition. The Jewish family culture includes history, it includes language, it includes food, it includes music and art. In fact, this year in our adult education program, we'll be learning all about Jewish culture in all of its varieties and diversities. It won't only be words, 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 as is so often the case in organized Jewish life. We celebrate Jewish holidays and life cycle events, but we adapt them to be meaningful and relevant to today. After all, culture evolves and changes over time. And Jewish culture was made by the Jewish people. We invented Shabbat. We invented the liturgy, and so we ourselves have the right to adapt and change and add and be creative in response. In fact, change is the Jewish tradition. And for us, food is just as Jewish as fasting. In our congregation on Yom Kippur, some choose to fast. Some choose a partial fast for part of the day. Some don't fast at all. But we try to use the tradition of going without to go beyond. There's actually a line in the Talmud that says the merit of a fast day lies in the charity that is given away. And so too for us, we use Yom Kippur as an opportunity to give of ourselves to help those in need. Whether or not we choose to go without for ourselves, we can also choose to do good in the world based on that tradition. For us, celebrating Jewish life gives us a sense of roots. It helps us grapple with the big questions of life. How to be a good person, where we find inspiration, what it means to be part of this Jewish tradition and to be a human being. After all, Jewish life is one response to the human condition. Sometimes we agree with our ancestors, and sometimes we find our own answers. And sometimes we find new ways to connect to that ancient wisdom. In our last Shabbat service a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the month of Elul, the month we are in now, that leads into Rosh Hashanah. There are no holidays scheduled, at least no major holidays. There's Shabbats, of course, and there's the beginning of the month with the Rosh Chodesh, but that's about it. And the rest of the month is designed to reflect and to think. And we talked about how we as humanistic Jews, without fearing divine punishment, can nevertheless use that opportunity to our advantage to think about what we've done and to work to repair our relationships with each other. Every culture, every variety of the human experience is unique and beautiful in its own way. And the more we connect with our family, the more it helps us understand others too. If you had never heard of a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, you wouldn't know where to put the quinceañera. But if you know what it's like to have a coming of age ceremony in your tradition, you can then appreciate that in other traditions on an equal footing. It's like fusion cuisine instead of Applebee's, where everything is bland and ordinary. So we are a humanistic community, we are a Jewish community, and we are a community, we are a congregation. We support each other through the difficult times, and we celebrate together when we are joyful. We provide a sense of belonging and connections to what they used to call fellow travelers. We provide a school to educate our children in cultural Jewish identity and our humanistic values. We celebrate creative and inclusive life cycle events like weddings and mitzvah coming of age celebrations. And we offer many opportunities for adults to learn and to enjoy life with each other. We embrace and celebrate the realities of interfaith and intercultural marriage. We welcome and serve everybody, singles and families, seniors, empty nesters, and young adults, the LGBTQ, and the straight cisgender. We celebrate our individual connections to Jewish life together in a diverse community. Now, in theory, you could do humanism on your own. You could even do Jewishness on your own or with your family or maybe a few friends. So why look for community? Well, one reason is that you have the strength of fellowship. It can be hard to feel like you're the only one out there who feels this way. And it can be liberating and indeed uplifting, inspiring to realize there are others who share your values. If you are swimming against the tide, it feels like in your family or in the Jewish community, to find others to swim with you makes your life stronger, makes your values more committed, and makes you more at home with yourself. We had one person who explored our community, and he said, this was really hard for my very Catholic wife to understand because she thought I was the only one like this. And now there's a whole group of you people. She wasn't quite sure how to fit that in her understanding of the world. So the first strength is the strength of fellowship. A second reason for community is that we provide resources and expertise. After all, you could send your child to a regular school or you could homeschool them. But in most cases, people have chosen schools, whether private or public, to send their children because there are resources and expertise in those settings. Teachers who are trained how to teach, schools that have resources and materials and AV that works well, and everything else that's required for a valuable education, not to mention a community of peers, which is also important for socialization. And so too with Kol Hadash. We offer resources, if only the rabbi, but also our teachers, our community of fellowship, our tradition of doing humanistic Judaism for many decades. We are the experts in doing this. We have experience and knowledge and expertise. I sometimes compare what we do in organized humanistic Judaism to people doing it on their own freelance to three examples of home life experience. The first would be mowing your lawn. If Jewish life for you is like mowing your lawn, then sure, you can do it yourself. And maybe you don't edge it perfectly, and maybe it gets bushy after a while because you've gotten busy or went out of town. And maybe it's not the most polished lawn out there, but it's good enough, and it's cheaper to do it yourself, and it's just mowing the lawn. Who really cares in the big picture? We're all dealing with the English choices to have a lawn to show off how rich you were. You didn't have to plant anything in it. This is the evolutionary origin of the American lawn. Well, given that background, mowing the lawn is not that important. Do it on your own. Have your kid do it. Fine. But if your Jewishness is perhaps a step up, if you consider your Jewishness to be like plumbing work or electrical work, there's nothing to stop you from opening the panel or turning off the water and diving into the pipes and trying to fix things. But many of us would rather not risk it. We'd rather call the experts. Ask for a friend, what works for you? What did you have a good experience with? And then use that electrician and that plumbing to make our life work smoothly and comfortably. It may be a little more expensive than doing it ourselves, but the value of the expertise and the knowledge is undeniable. And then the third category is internal surgery. Now, I would not have anyone who just looked around on the internet and saw a YouTube video do surgery on me or someone that I like. I would prefer to have someone with knowledge and expertise and experience in a community of shared knowledge, like the medical community and a hospital. That's where I would go for surgery. So it all really depends on how much we value our Jewish connection. Is it like mowing the lawn? Is it like plumbing and electrical, or is it really valuable, like surgery? And we want to have the best possible community to support us in that vision and in that journey. So then there's one last question to ask. Let's say I've sold you on the concept of community. Why Kol Hadash? Why this community? And I can express this the best and conclude and open up for conversation with a story from one of our early anniversary events. I was sitting at a table, it must have been our 5th anniversary celebration. And someone asked me at the table, why do you think we have so many interesting people who are part of Kol Hadash? And I said, well, It's not just me, I know, because a lot of them joined before I was involved at that point. But we are not a community of convenience. We are not a community of showing off or a community for the easy carpool. We are a community of ideas. And people who seek that kind of community out, people who want to be with other people who are interested in ideas, those are the kind of people that I like to be with, that I find interesting, who seek integrity, who look for the truth, and who want to live their truth through their Jewish life and their everyday experience and values. I think a community that inspires that kind of behavior is the kind of community that I want to be a part of. Once we tried to sum up who we were in a short slogan. It was a long process. We had a lot of candidates for that. My favorite didn't make it. It was cheap and easy. I thought that would be, a nice expression of who we are, but who wants to wear a t-shirt that says cheap and easy on it? But another one that made it near the final was like-minded people who don't think alike. I think that's a wonderful summary of who we are. We have shared cultural roots, we have shared values, but we don't have to agree on everything. In fact, if I were in a community that agreed on everything, I wouldn't want to be a part of that community because that feels like groupthink to me. I'm glad to have people who disagree even with me and who disagree with each other civilly and as part of a community. It's like the stories we read in our service tonight about people who argue with each other, but if they can understand the other side of the argument, they are a step ahead because they hear both sides. And so this is our community. It is Kol Hadash, which has two meanings depending on how you spell it in Hebrew. If you spelled it with a kuf, it means a new voice, which is how we began singing, and music is still an important part of who we are. But you could also spell it with a kaf. And if you wrote it Kol Hadash with a kaf, it means everything is new. And I think that's true for us as well. We are the heirs of Jewish culture, but it's all ours to choose from and to create. And that is what makes our community the one that we have chosen. And it makes us, I think, unique and valuable and definitely worth it.